What if there was a network of rooms and tunnels under Egypt? The new discovery in Egypt that scares scientists has been around for millennia. We just didn't understand and discover it all right away. Egypt seems to be an almost inexhaustible source of archaeological wonders and sensations. Ramses II visited France. Ramses II was one of the greatest pharaohs the land of the Nile has ever seen. His reign lasted an incredible 66 years, and Ramses used it to immortalize himself forever in the annals of the country and the world. Ramses II became a legend. His monumental buildings have been preserved to this day and inspire millions of visitors every year. The famous rock temple of Abu Simbel is one of the best-known Ramses buildings, and the ruler placed himself in front of the entrance in quadruplicate. Ramses built himself into world history forever with epic-making structures such as these, and also loved to have monumental statues of himself erected. One of the most impressive depictions of Ramses was surprisingly discovered in a modern residential area in Cairo. This 8-meter stone column probably once stood in a square in the ancient capital of Heliopolis. Made of hard quartzite stone, it shows the pharaoh in the typical Egyptian style and in majestic and divine erection. The statue was probably made after Ramses' victory in the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites. Although the battle itself ended in a draw, Ramses depicted it as a great victory and immortalized it in many ways in his monuments. Ramses' personality is often described as charismatic and dynamic. He was known for his ambition and determination to expand the boundaries of his empire and consolidate his power. In 1213 BC, Ramses II presumably died at the proud age of 90 or 91. In 1976, his mummy had to be processed by experts as it had begun to mold due to moisture. The remains of Ramses, who had been dead for almost 3,000 years, were brought to France for this purpose. At the French military base Le Bourget, the mummy was received with military honors, and Ramses II also had a genuine Egyptian passport with him. The name on it was simply Ramses II, and the Egyptian officials gave his occupation as ruler off-duty. Ramses would certainly have liked that. Neath's mysterious tomb in the City of the Dead. A century after the discovery of the pristine tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, archaeologists made a significant discovery in the form of a mysterious tomb attributed to a previously little-known queen named Neath. This queen was closely associated with the ancient goddess of war, Neath, who played a major role in the Egyptian pantheon during the First Dynasty. Before this discovery, there was hardly any mention of this woman in any known historical records. This makes this find particularly interesting, as it had the potential to rewrite history and completely redefine our perception of the ancient Egyptian world once again. Neath is also one of the 4 patron goddesses of the canopic shrine from Tutankhamun's tomb. Over the years, hundreds of tombs have been excavated in the Saqqara necropolis, including great kings and queens. Normally, however, the personalities on important monuments are mentioned by name, together with their reigns, but there was no mention of Neath anywhere. Nearby, researchers found the remains of some of the young King Tutankhamun's closest generals and advisors. These political allies were buried in beautifully designed and decorated coffins. The sarcophagi were lovingly decorated with unique faces, and the name and function of the deceased was inscribed on each one. Neath was probably the concubine of King Tetri I, the greatest ruler of the First Dynasty. Teti had an imposing pyramid built in Saqqara in his honor. As Neath was buried so lovingly and adorned with many grave goods and rich inscriptions, she was probably very near to Teti and the people. It is possible that she was not mentioned because she had rivals who prevented her immortalization in the country's royal annals. An underground network? Are there rooms and a tunnel system under the Great Pyramids that connect important buildings in Egypt? Some modern para-researchers claim exactly that, but these people are not alone. In ancient times, the Egyptian scholar Herodotus came to the land of the Nile and left behind numerous writings, including descriptions of rooms under the pyramids that supposedly no longer exist today. Herodotus is now regarded as the father of histography. He lived in the 5th century BC and described various aspects of Egyptian civilization, including detailed descriptions of the pyramids of Giza, along with a system of underground chambers and passages. The walls of this chamber were covered with ancient hieroglyphics, which modern speculation suggests may have been a kind of instruction manual for the scientific fictional purpose of the pyramids. In reality, an ancient civilization of very high beings is said to have built the pyramids, and they could have been a kind of stargate or dimensional gateway. It is still noticeable today that no hieroglyphics or drawings can be seen inside the upper structures. The structures appear to be more functional, which could prove that they were power stations or some kind of technology that we simply cannot imagine. Cruel, heroic ritual. It sounds crazy, but in ancient Egypt, many things were possible that we can hardly imagine today. This people not only accomplished extraordinary feats of construction, but were also active in warfare. Over the millennia, the Egyptians fought with numerous neighboring empires and tribes. The peoples of those times were not squeamish in their dealings with each other, and a gruesome find near their city of Avaris still bears silent witness to a brutal ritual. During excavations near an ancient Egyptian palace complex, researchers came across 4 pits containing a total of 16 severed human hands. Not only were these hands unusually large, but they were all right hands, which made the discovery even more mysterious. Avaris was the capital of a West Asian empire called the Hyksos, which also existed in northern Egypt from 1650 to 1550 BC. The fact that all the hands were found on the right suggests that they were collected as trophies or evidence of military victories. There is historical evidence that in ancient Egypt and other ancient cultures, it was customary to cut off the right hand of a defeated enemy, regardless of whether the enemy was dead or still alive. The hand served as proof of victory and could be exchanged for rewards such as gold. Even if the enemy survived his capture and amputation, he could no longer wield a sword and was at least rendered useless for war. Why these hands are so unusually large, however, remains a mystery. At the time, even men were barely taller than 1.6 meters, and the hands would be unusually large for today's average men. It is possible that they belonged to very tall fighters or to members of a hostile people who were unusually tall. Very little is known about the Hyksos Empire and its culture. The scientists hope to learn more about this ancient civilization through further excavations. A complete 3,000-year-old city. Scientists have long only dreamed of this near Luxor, the site of the incredible Valley of the Kings. A fully preserved ancient Egyptian city has been discovered, and this city was not just any city. Before its discovery, many did not believe in the existence of the so-called Lost Golden City, also known as the Rise of Aten. This city, which is around 3,000 years old, was long just a legend. Researchers found it under a seemingly endless sand dune. Presumably, the entire city fell victim to a huge sandstorm and was perfectly preserved as the result. The Lost Golden City dates back to the Golden Age of Egypt. During the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom, the city was the center of an enigmatic young pharaoh, and previous finds in the ruins point to a role for the mysterious Queen Tai, the wife of Amenhotep III, who seems to have been greatly revered in the city. But much more exciting for researchers than the pharaoh statues are the many homes and workplaces that have survived in the Lost Golden City. The building still contains ceramics, fireplaces, animal stables, and work areas. Even a fully preserved mummy workshop has been discovered, allowing researchers to perfectly recreate the production of mummies in Egypt for the first time. This discovery offers truly extraordinary insights into what is considered one of the most glorious periods of Egyptian civilization. The strangest pyramid in Egypt. Egypt is the land of pyramids. Among all the buildings in the country, one pyramid stands out in particular. This time, we're not talking about the Great Pyramid of Giza, but the Pyramid of Pharaoh Djefri. Located in Abu Rawash, about 5 miles north of the Great Pyramids of Giza, the ruins of this pyramid are particularly fascinating and mysterious, as they were found in a state of incompleteness or destruction. Djefri was one of the sons of the pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, who has long been falsely credited with building the Great Pyramid. The Pyramid of Djefri is unique in that the upper half of the structure appears to be completely missing, and only the lower levels, which are about 9 meters high, remain today. There is some disagreement among the experts as to whether the pyramid was ever completed or whether it is even a pyramid in the traditional sense. Some suggest that it may have been an unrecognized sun temple. Another puzzling element of the Pyramid of Djeffrey is its unusual location. It was built far away from the traditional burial sites and from Giza, which raises questions about its purpose and meaning. The pyramid is located on a rocky hill called Abu Rawash, and although the site has been explored several times since the early 19th century, much about this historically significant site remains a mystery. An Egyptian shroud in Zagreb? This find puzzled scientists for a long time. The Archaeological Museum of Zagreb houses a mysterious artifact known as the Linen Book of Zagreb. It is an ancient Egyptian linen strip, originally about 3.35 meters long and divided into 12 columns of writing. This extraordinary piece was discovered together with the mummy of a non-royal Egyptian woman wrapped in several layers of this mysterious linen. The symbols on the linen were initially a mystery. They resembled Egyptian writing, but could never be deciphered. Closer examination by language experts revealed the real reason for this. The text may not have been written by the Egyptians at all, but by the Etruscans, a mysterious ancient civilization that lived in what is now Italy. The Etruscans were one of the first great powers of the ancient Western Mediterranean, but left behind little written evidence. Therefore, the Linen Book from Zagreb is an invaluable artifact that may offer new insights into this lost culture and its writing system. Everyday life in Tutankhamun's time. It sounds crazy, but it's true. A completely new and almost completely preserved 3,000-year-old city was discovered near Luxor. The find became known as the Lost Golden City. This sensational discovery is the largest of its kind in the whole of Egypt and dates back to the time of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun. The well-preserved city offers an unprecedented insight into the life of the ancient Egyptians at the time of the New Kingdom. Intact houses, workshops, temples, and streets now finally allow scientists to fully reconstruct Egyptian everyday life 3,000 years ago. The finds in the city, including jewelry, pottery, and tools, are evidence of the craftsmanship and culture of the era. This discovery will change our understanding of Egyptian history forever and shed light on the daily life, economy, and social structure of the time. Who knows Pharaoh Khafra? Who would have thought that a statue of a relatively unknown pharaoh could arouse such admiration? Pharaoh Khafra reigned in the 4th dynasty from 2570 to 2530 BC, and thus in an era in which Egyptian craftsmanship and architecture reached a peak. His statue was made of extremely rare and hard diorite stone. This masterpiece of ancient Egyptian art was discovered in 1860 and today is one of the most admired artifacts in the Great Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Khafra's depiction captivates people to this day with a pose of strength and dignity. The fine details of the face and the dignified execution of the royal insignia still radiate an unusual attraction today, and thousands of visitors to the museum stand spellbound to admire the king. Books of the Dead. Magical or pure humbug? Have you ever thought about what the ancient Egyptians thought about the afterlife? I mean, it's all too well known that the Egyptians had elaborate funeral cults, but do you have any idea what they really thought about death? Well, for Egyptians, death didn't really exist. They knew that the journey continued immediately after the physical body passed away, and all Egyptians wanted to be well prepared for this journey. It was not the case that Egyptians automatically entered the kingdom of heaven, or so they thought. They needed a kind of travel guide, and these were the famous Books of the Dead. Now, a 52-foot-long papyrus has been discovered in Saqqara that is considered to be one of the longest and largest Books of the Dead in Egyptian history. The ancient manuscript contains spells and rituals that supported the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. The owner of the papyrus must have been very rich, as the creation of the magical travel guides through the realm of the dead cost quite a sum. Today, historians agree that the priests of the time were behind it all. Similar to the Christian sale of indulgences in Europe, this was a big business that possibly served the pockets of the priesthood more than the death-fearing buyers of these documents. New room discovered in the Great Pyramid. Consider for a moment the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the last remaining wonders of the ancient world. Its interior conceals an ingenious system of shafts and rooms whose true meaning is still unknown to this day. Some say that the rooms and corridors were burial chambers, but no mummy has ever been found there. Others are convinced that the pyramids were gigantic power stations, either to generate electricity or to be close to the gods. Now, using the latest technology, a previously unknown room in the Great Pyramid has been discovered because it was walled up. Does this mean that we will finally decipher the true function of these buildings? Possibly. Scientists are currently using muon radiography to search for other previously undiscovered rooms, and we may yet find out the purpose of this monumental structure. Hands simply severed. It sounds gruesome. In Avaris, the ancient Hyksos capital, archaeologists discovered a pit full of severed right hands. These approximately 3,600-year-old finds shed a completely different light on war practices in ancient Egypt. The theory is that these hands were presented by Egyptian soldiers as trophies to prove their victories in battle. For each hand presented, they received gold, making this gruesome practice a kind of macabre proof of achievement. This pit with the severed hands teaches us in a gruesome way that these people were not only high in art, culture, and architecture. The ancient Egyptians were also cruel and sometimes very warlike. Unknown queen found. Egyptologists were astonished when they discovered the tomb of a previously unknown queen in Saqqara, one of the richest archaeological areas in Egypt. Shortly afterwards, an inscription was found stating that this tomb belonged to Queen Neath. The woman must have been extremely important during her lifetime. Around 300 coffins were found next to the tomb, presumably containing generals and advisors of the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun. Neath was possibly the wife or mother of an early pharaoh, as there is an eponymous goddess of hunting and war, which suggests that the queen may have been a high religious leader. Others suggest that she was previously an unknown ruler or regent of the early periods of Egypt. The longest carnivorous dinosaur. Long before Egypt even existed, many millions of years ago, there was an ocean where deserts and ancient buildings and pyramids are today. Today, certain areas of the desert are a treasure trove for paleontologists who found the Spinosaurus among other things. This creature was once thought to be a typical land dinosaur, but finds now show that this creature was actually a skilled water hunter. Spinosaurus agitibicus was actually the longest carnivorous dinosaur in the world and lived around 95 to 100 million years ago. It is possible that this creature evolved from a land dinosaur into an aquatic dinosaur, just as small land mammals eventually became gigantic whales. Spinosaurus had a long, crocodile-like jaw, and the bones showed a certain relationship to today's penguins. Meteorite from an alien planet. The Sahara Desert is a veritable treasure trove of relics dating far back in history. Long before the first pharaohs reigned in the region, a meteorite from a very special place hit the Earth here. The meteorite, which has been proven to be 4.56 billion years old, came from a planet that probably no longer exists today. The composition of the rock revealed to the scientists that it is most likely a remnant from the early days of our solar system. At a time when there were more protoplanets orbiting the Sun, it may have split off from its home due to a collision with another planet and then thundered into our still young Earth. The discovery of this meteorite in the Sahara is proof that there is still much to discover and decipher on our home planet. Rosetta Stone, an Egyptian dictionary. It is incredible how lucky archaeologists were when they discovered the Rosetta Stone in 1799. Named after the place where it was found, the Egyptian city of Rosetta, this stone was the long-sought key to deciphering mysterious Egyptian hieroglyphs. Imagine, no one could even begin to read the many inscriptions on templates and in tombs across the country until this coherent text emerged. This stone made it easy for researchers because it is inscribed in 3 different languages: Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic, and ancient Greek characters. As all three texts are identical, the scholars were able to translate the previously incomprehensible language of ancient Egypt. The Rosetta Stone was therefore a real stroke of luck in history. It records laws, lays down rules for public behavior, and sets out the taxes that Egyptians had to pay. This makes the Rosetta Stone something like the civil code of antiquity, and we can marvel that a complex society like the Egyptians managed with a single stone, while we have whole tombs full of legal texts. Glass in the desert? Who would have thought that a meteorite impact in the Libyan desert thousands of years ago would lead to one of the most fascinating finds in ancient Egypt? The so-called desert glass, a rare form of natural glass created by the immense heat of the impact. Glass of this type was found throughout the region. The consistently green glass also fascinated the ancient Egyptians. What was the temple city of Temp Magna? Great Egypt experts and researchers cut their teeth on the question of Cleopatra's tomb. Even the otherwise omniscient archaeologist and former Egyptian antiquities administrator Zahi Hawass had no idea where the queen was buried. Then a woman came up with the idea of searching where no one had ever looked before, even though the location was obvious. Temp Magna was a flourishing port city with a very special temple and something of a secret center of power for the Ptolemaic rulers of Egypt, from whose line Cleopatra also sprang. Originally built in the 2nd century BC, this temple served the cult of Osiris, one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. The name Temp Magna actually means the Great Tomb of Osiris, and the name proves that the site's role as a possible burial place. In ancient times, the temple was a religious cultural center and pilgrimage site for thousands of Egyptians. The adjoining village, which had a small beach, is said to have been a popular meeting place for lovers. The Ptolemaic dynasty celebrated the worship of Osiris, the god of the realm of the dead and rebirth, at this site. Cleopatra and her father, Ptolemy I, were not really Egyptians at all. They came from Macedonia and came to the Nile in succession to Alexander the Great. However, both adopted the Egyptian belief in gods, and in addition to Osiris, Cleopatra was particularly devoted to Isis, the goddess of beauty. Cleopatra was therefore not a true pharaoh, but merely a queen. Strangely enough, not a single tomb of the Ptolemaic rulers has been found to this day. This dynasty must have had its burial site somewhere, and Kathleen Martinez is certain that it is the Temp Magna Temple. The discovery of an elaborate tunnel system beneath the temple, along with other finds such as coins, statues, and mummies, has attracted the attention of historians and archaeologists worldwide. These finds were the first indication that Kathleen Martinez was right. Let us now travel together to the temple of the Temp Magna and immerse ourselves in the time when Cleopatra regularly came here to find peace and balance from city life in Alexandria. Temp Magna was an impressive building that reflected the splendor and cultural wealth of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Imagine a bright temple made of fine limestone in the center. Imposing columns adorn the entrance, and spicy smells wafted through the air from large incense bowls. The temple stood on a spacious platform, surrounded by a high wall that separated it from the surrounding landscape. The walls of the temple precinct were decorated with elaborate hieroglyphics and colorful frescoes of Egyptian mythology. Inside the temple were several chambers and sanctuaries dedicated to various gods. A statue of Osiris stood in the magnificent center of the temple. It is said that all Ptolemies had a special relationship with Temp Magna. The temple not only served as a religious center, but also as a symbol of their power and their claim to be the legitimate successors of the pharaonic tradition. Several times a year, there were large celebrations and ceremonies in the temple and outside in the small harbor town. Then the people celebrated their gods and the ruler Cleopatra. Are the mummies Cleopatra and Mark Antony? Kathleen Martinez had to dig and search in Egypt for almost 20 years before she finally reached her goal. A colleague found the entrance to an underground tunnel system in the temple complex of Temp Magna. Kathleen Martinez was immediately convinced that she had found the entrance to the tombs of the Ptolemies, and she was probably right. The first tunnel that appeared led through several layers of granite and reached about 1,000 meters into the depths. Radio scans of the ground showed that there was an extensive tunnel system under Temp Magna. Before archaeologists could enter the tunnel for the first time, experts had to make sure that the tunnel was safe. The first people to enter the tunnel after almost 2,000 years praised the construction as a geometric marvel. The routing, angles, and design of the gradients showed that, as in many other places in Egypt, fantastic master builders had been at work here. A little deeper in the tunnel, the researchers found ceramic vessels and pottery shards, a rectangular limestone block, and many niches. Some of the walls were damaged, probably due to at least 23 earthquakes that struck the Egyptian coast between 320 AD and 1303 AD. Many Egyptian coastal cities sank into the sea as a result of the earthquakes. Part of Alexandria was swallowed up by the Mediterranean, Heraclion disappeared, and Taposiris Magna was strangely spared for the most part. Even deeper in the tunnel, the researchers found coins with the portraits and names of Queen Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, as well as numerous headless statues and statues of the goddess Isis. All these finds encouraged Martinez and her team to keep searching. In 2021, the team announced the discovery of two mummies, a woman covered in gold leaf and a man, also completely covered in gold after death, had been buried in a niche in the tunnel system. Could these be the mummies of Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony? Kathleen Martinez was critical. She had expected more. These two mummies had been deposited quickly and apparently with little splendor. Although the gilding shows that they are certainly two high-ranking Egyptians, a little gold leaf decoration is not enough for a queen of Cleopatra's rank and her lover. On the other hand, Cleopatra and Mark Antony were both buried in the turmoil of warlike conditions. It is therefore quite possible that their mummies were buried rather modestly compared to the other funeral pomp of the Egyptians. Some experts speculate that servants quickly made the queen's body disappear to protect it from Roman outrages. But Martinez lacked clear evidence. A necklace, a symbol, a sword, or anything else that would distinguish one of the greatest rulers in human history and her lover. A life for Cleopatra. It sounds crazy, but a woman from the Caribbean, of all places, is currently trying to find the burial place of the queen who was lost for so long. Kathleen Martinez is almost as extraordinary a personality as Cleopatra. Born in Santo Domingo, the young woman graduated in law at the age of 19 and gave lectures. Kathleen Martinez said in an interview that Cleopatra came into her life through an argument with her father. Professor Fausto Martinez, a successful legal scholar, did not have a good opinion of Cleopatra. Kathleen had just read Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra and was on fire for the Queen of the Nile. Kathleen's father insulted Cleopatra as a harlot and deceitful snake who only had power on her mind. In fact, many sources report that the young Cleopatra had two of her siblings murdered so that she could ascend to the throne herself, and later she is said to have wrapped Caesar and Mark Antony around her finger out of a thirst for power. Kathleen nevertheless found her father's judgment harsh and unpleasant. After all the great male heroes and emperors of the time had acted in the interests of power, and even icons like Caesar and others did not exactly resort to squeamish means. If a woman behaved in the same way, the judgment was incomparably harsher and more unjust. After this argument, Kathleen wanted to know who this woman really was and found out everything she could about Cleopatra. She plunged into the Plutarch's account of Marcus Antonius's relationship with the Egyptian queen and came across the controversial image Rome had of the beautiful woman from the Nile. She was loved, and men in particular fell for her in droves, but Cleopatra was also hated. Plutarch's reports range from the highest reverence to defamation of the queen as a decadent and voluptuous despot. Plutarch described Cleopatra's beauty as not the kind that astonishes the observer, but her manner was captivating. Her appearance, as well as her persuasiveness in conversation and her character, which accompanied every interaction, were stimulating. The tone of her voice was also a pleasure, and her tongue was like an instrument with many strings. Over the years, Kathleen Martinez has read every available text on Cleopatra and has noticed that not a single account has any knowledge of how she really died and where she was buried. How did Cleopatra really live? Cleopatra's generally known story begins with she was able to win over Julius Caesar, the emperor of Rome. Caesar came to the Nile as a conqueror and then fell for the charms of the 21-year-old queen. Wrapped in a carpet, Cleopatra allowed herself to be smuggled into Caesar's chambers by servants. The rest is history. Caesar fell for the young woman, continued to let her rule the Nile, and made her his mistress. When their son Caesarion was born, Caesar brought his mistress to Rome. Cleopatra resided royally within walking distance of Caesar's palace, and the ruler of Rome was not afraid to appear in public with his exotic lover. The only problem was that Caesar turned his wife's relatives against him. Some of them were powerful Roman senators. Some reports suggest that Caesar completely lost his mind as a result of his contact with Cleopatra. However, it is not known whether it was really the improper relationship with Cleopatra that triggered a deadly revolt against Caesar. The fact is that Caesar fell victim to a plot and was murdered. Shortly afterwards, Cleopatra was forced to flee Rome. Later, the Roman general Mark Antony fell in love with the beautiful queen. The two spent several years together in Egypt and had to flee at some point when political unrest broke out. Mark Antony fell on the battlefield at Actium in 30 BC in the course of military conflicts with Octavian, who later became Emperor Augustus. When Cleopatra learned of her lover's death, she is said to have buried him quickly and planned her suicide. However, it is still not clear whether this version of the story is true. The Bite of the Cobra was a Hollywood production based on Shakespeare's images and may have been pure fiction. It is possible that Cleopatra also tried in vain to win Octavian over and was murdered by the Romans. Were Romans also turned into mummies? Did you know that Egypt was once a melting pot of cultures? Egyptians, Black Africans such as Nubians, Greeks, Persians, and Romans came together in the country that has been considered the cradle of civilization for thousands of years. Now, for the first time, scientists have made a remarkable discovery: the mummy of an individual from the Roman era. This discovery once again sheds new light on the fusion of Egyptian and Roman cultures and offers a rare insight into the life and burial practices of this period. The mummy was found in an excellent state of preservation and dates from a period when Egypt was under Roman rule. This period lasted from 30 BC to 395 AD and was characterized by a fusion of Roman and Egyptian culture, art, and architecture. The embalming techniques are typically Egyptian, while the grave goods and symbols in and around the coffin indicate Roman influences. The mummy itself provides a wealth of information. Using modern technology such as CT scans and DNA analysis, scientists have reconstructed the age, health, and even the lifestyle of the deceased. These analyses have shown that people at this time ate a mixture of Egyptian and Roman food, and further analysis will show whether this was a Roman or an Egyptian with Roman habits. Egyptian statue suddenly moves. Can you imagine how an Egyptian statue that was on display in a museum suddenly turned on its own? This statue, dating from around 1800 BC, depicts Neb-Sinu, a middle-ranking man in ancient Egypt. It had been on display in the Manchester Museum in England for decades, attracting the attention of visitors and scholars. When it began to rotate without any apparent external influence, Neb-Sinu suddenly became world famous. The statue, which is about 25 centimeters high and made of stone, had stood motionless on its display case for decades. Its sudden movement was a shock and triggered a variety of theories. Some believed in supernatural explanations, others put forward scientific hypotheses as to how this was possible. Could the rotation be a sign of an ancient curse, or the spirit of Neb-Sinu making itself known? Scientists and engineers investigated the phenomenon further and found that the statue's rotation was caused by subtle vibrations created by foot traffic and the daily operation of the museum. To test this theory, the statue was placed on a glass plate and monitored with a time-lapse camera. The footage showed that the statue rotated slowly during the day, while at night there was no movement, supporting the theory of vibrations. The Golden Mummy, a rare treasure. In the Bahariya Oasis, a remote location in the Egyptian desert, an extraordinary discovery was made. The Golden Mummy dates back to the time of the Greco-Roman occupation of Egypt between the 1st century BC and the 2nd century AD. Experts consider the find to be spectacular, as the Golden Mummy is characterized by its unique and magnificent gilding. The gilding which covers the face and parts of the body symbolizes the divinity and high social status of the deceased. It is believed that the mummy belonged to an influential and wealthy person, possibly a priest or a local ruler. The tomb is just one of many in the Bahariya oasis. The mummy is also another exciting testimony to the culture synthesis during the Greco-Roman period in Egypt. The type of mummification and the grave goods in the tomb show a mixture of Egyptian burial rituals with Greco-Roman influences. The use of gold in mummification was not commonplace in Egypt and indicates a truly special reverence for the deceased. The oldest tomb in Egypt. In the fascinating world of Egyptian archaeology, the discovery of the oldest known tomb stands out as another significant milestone in the study of this enigmatic culture. This tomb dates back to around 1830 BC and is located in the necropolis of Kubet el-Hawa. This site is also known for its rich collection of tombs and artifacts. This discovery takes us back to the early history of Egypt and its burial practices. The tomb could date from the end of the 12th dynasty, and it shows a striking orientation to the winter solstice. This orientation is an indication of the deep-rooted astronomical knowledge and religious beliefs of the ancient Egyptians. The sun's rays, which fall directly into the tomb during the winter solstice, symbolizes rebirth and immortality. Both were central concepts in the Egyptian belief system. It is believed the tomb belonged to a local ruler or a high-ranking official named Hikaib. Scholars are now trying to trace the life of this person from inscriptions, and this would give us another key to understanding the complex history and culture of ancient Egypt. Always surprising, Tutankhamun. He is undoubtedly the most well-traveled pharaoh of modern times. Tutankhamun is the archaeological superstar among mummies. Discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings, this find marked the beginning of modern Egyptology. Tutankhamun himself was rather insignificant. An extremely young pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, he ruled Egypt for a brief period around 1332 to 1323 BC. His tomb is famous for its near-pristine condition and the wealth of treasures and artifacts it contained. The discovery of the tomb was a sensation, as it was one of the few royal tombs that had remained largely untouched since antiquity. The burial chamber contained Tutankhamun's sarcophagus and mummy, surrounded by treasures that offer unique insights into the art, culture, and religious life of ancient Egypt. Among the most remarkable finds are the golden coffin, Tutankhamun's iconic golden death mask, and a variety of items destined for the afterlife, including weapons, furniture, jewelry, and amulets. These artifacts have since traveled around the world many times. Tutankhamun's mummy, however, is closely guarded and remained in Egypt. Today, the ruler shares his treasures and splendor with millions of people in a worldwide traveling exhibition. Only recently, some artifacts caused another stir. Tutankhamun was carrying an iron dagger, and iron did not even exist in his time. This discovery led to wild speculation about time travel. But in the end, researchers came to the conclusion that the iron was extracted from meteorites in an incredibly skillful way. The Pyramids: Revolution through Scanning Technology. Did you know that we can X-ray entire buildings using nanoparticles from space? Recent breakthroughs in this scanning technology have ushered in a whole new, exciting era in the study of the Egyptian pyramids. Scientists and archaeologists have used advanced muon radiography to delve deep inside these ancient wonders. This technology from particle physics makes it possible to uncover hidden rooms and passages within the pyramid structures without physically damaging the buildings. The scan was successful. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, it revealed a previously unknown large cavity within the pyramid. This space is located directly above the Great Gallery and raises new questions about the purpose and construction of the pyramids. Some theories suggest that this room may have had a structural function, while others suggest that it was used for ritual purposes. However, the exact function and significance of this room remain a mystery. A new scan is expected to reveal even more secrets about the pyramids, and we may be on the verge of deciphering these impressive structures. Nefertiti's secret. Since its discovery in 1912, the bust of Nefertiti has captivated us. One of the most beautiful sculptures in human history was discovered by the German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt. Although it is one of the best known and most admired works of art from ancient Egypt, this remarkable sculpture has been on display in Berlin for more than 100 years. Nefertiti was the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten in the Amarna period around 1340 BC. The bust is famous for its extraordinary lifelike depiction and artistic perfection. It shows Nefertiti with an elongated neckline, symmetrical facial features, and a striking crown. Despite the age of the sculpture, the colors are still vivid and rich in detail, which indicates the particularly high-quality materials and techniques used in its production. An interesting detail of the bust is that it is only finished on one side. The left side of the face is more detailed than the right, suggesting that the bust may have served as a model for other artworks or was placed in a niche where only one side was visible. Nefertiti's bust is not only a masterpiece of Egyptian art, but also a symbol of the beauty and complexity of ancient Egyptian civilization. The headrest is extraordinary, and experts found that Nefertiti may have had a shaved head in order to safely place this particular ruler's crown on her head. The lack of hair does not detract from her beauty, and she remains an incomparable testimony to the artistic genius of ancient Egypt. Mummy of the crocodile god, Sobek. Who would have thought that even gods could become mummies? Sobek was the mighty and fearsome god of strength in Egyptian mythology and was often depicted as a man with a crocodile's head or as a whole crocodile. He was considered the ruler of the waters and the creator of the Nile, and despite his dark features, he was also a deeply revered symbol of fertility and rebirth. The worship of Sobek was particularly widespread in areas where crocodiles were common, such as Kom Ombo and Fayum. The discovery of crocodile mummies in Egypt has now opened up a whole new chapter in research into the cult of Sobek. These mummies were found in temples and sacred sites dedicated to the crocodile god. For the people of Egypt, crocodiles were probably really living embodiments of the god Sobek. They were sacred, worshipped and embalmed and buried like kings and queens after their death. The crocodile mummies range from small baby crocodiles to large specimens. Many of these mummies were buried with elaborate amulets and other grave goods, further emphasizing their importance in religious practice. Ushabti figurines, servants of the afterlife in ancient Egypt. Ushabti figurines are another mystery of Egyptian culture. These small statuettes made of clay, wood, stone, or sometimes even bronze were placed in the grave of the deceased so that they would be available as servants in the afterlife. Ushabtis means answerer, and their function was to relieve the dead of all manual labor in the afterlife. According to the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians, the deceased had to carry out fieldwork and other physical tasks in the afterlife. Ushabtis were inscribed with a spell that enabled them to rise and work in place of the deceased when called upon. For mere laborers, Ushabtis are amazingly colorful, detailed, and ornate. Even more bizarre, the shape of a mummified body is often also decorated with traditional Egyptian burial masks. However, the small working mummies also carried agricultural tools such as hoes and baskets. Their size varied, as did their number. Some of the dead had only a few very large Ushabtis with them, others a large number of small figures, and in other tombs they are a colorful mix. The Pyramid of Giza and Saqqara. For a long time, scientists have been researching around structures that, despite our knowledge of the Egyptians, still don't seem like they came from this earth. The pyramids of Giza still defy imagination. Billions of stones were stacked here in a precision work and processed with a skill that even today can hardly be explained technically. Inside, the pyramids are no less mysterious complexes of geometric shafts, chambers, and strange angles. Never have the meaning and purpose of these bizarre arrangements been understood. The first scientists to take up the pyramids said that these structures were tombs of great kings, which may have been a foolish misjudgment. If we look a little closer at the culture of the Egyptians, we find clues to the true meaning of pyramid in ancient Egypt. About 30 kilometers south of Giza lies the ancient necropolis of Saqqara. Great kings, queens, high officials, priests, or rich citizens of Egypt were buried here in numerous tombs. Whoever had rank and name in Egypt was buried in Saqqara inside or around a pyramid. However, none of the pyramids found in Saqqara bears any significant resemblance to the construction of the pyramids of Giza. Certainly, the square base and the shape tapered with four sides are similar. In detail, however, the structures in Saqqara have been implemented quite differently than the pyramids in Giza. Even the largest pyramid-shaped mausoleums here, and most of the pyramids in Saqqara, are simply stacked step pyramids. But the structures have a number of other differences that should make us at least think. The Pyramid of Neath. In 2022, the Antiquities Authority of Egypt announced a new find that will forever change the historiography of ancient Egypt. The pyramid of a previously unknown queen was found in Saqqara. Not far from the pyramid, which was meant to honor the life and reign of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Teti, Egyptologists found another magnificently decorated pyramid. The cult of the dead, for which this nation is so well known today, began in Saqqara as early as the Old Kingdom, more than 5,000 years ago. The first ruler who had a magnificent mausoleum built here was King Hor-Ahar. Among the most famous and largest buildings in the city, which served only the dead, is the Pyramid of Teti. Teti ruled the land on the Nile about 4,300 years ago. Teti's life was considered to be relatively well-researched, but now Egyptologists have discovered that he too had a secret that they have not yet been able to uncover. Under the direction of Egyptologist Zahi Hawass, researchers uncovered the tomb of an ancient Egyptian queen who had been completely unknown up to this point. But how could this be? Today, Egyptologists know from inscriptions of temples, almost without gaps, every region and regentess as well as details of the life of these people. Teti had 2 wives and queens during his life, but apparently he had a third one who was not mentioned anywhere. However, this wife could not have been unimportant because she was given one of the most magnificent mausoleums ever seen by Egyptologists. Scientists have to realize once again that they do not know everything about this people by far. The inscriptions tell the life of a woman named Neath. The great queen was buried sumptuously with an entire court staff. Neath bore the title Daughter of the God Geb. The earth god Geb was a patron of noble women in Egyptian mythology, from which it can be concluded that Neath already had a high rank before her marriage to Teti. The mysterious queen was buried with one of the largest and longest books of the dead ever recovered in Egypt. Almost 4 meters measured the papyrus ones on which priests marked out for Neath the way through the underworld into the paradisical world, Aura. Initially, some 300 sarcophagi and mummies, which were placed in the pyramids long after the death of Teti and Neath, posed a puzzle. Zahi Hawass explained that people in ancient Egypt worshipped their kings like gods. Teti's fame continued unbroken almost until 1,000 years after his reign. Those who could afford it secured a burial place somewhere near a great godlike king. This is also how the mummies are said to have ended up in the pyramids of Giza, the only mummies ever found there. Quite different from the pyramid buildings in Saqqara, no king or queen has ever been found in the 3 pyramids of Giza. Quite unlike the magnificently decorated pyramids of Neath or Teti, the pyramids of Giza were empty inside. No funerary objects and no paintings adorn these buildings, which is why many critical Egyptologists today are of the opinion that these pyramids were never tombs but served another purpose. The error of thinking that the Great Pyramids were burial sites could have been made already in the late epochs of the Egyptian Empire. An inscription in the Great Pyramid, which refers to King Cheops, could have been nothing more than a graffiti, or Cheops attributed the building to himself, although he was not the builder. In fact, his mummy was never found in the premises of the Great Pyramid, and all other mummies were placed there centuries later. The mummy of Pharaoh Cheops, to whom, consequently, the construction of the Great Pyramid may have been wrongly attributed, was never found. If his true burial place still turns up somewhere, this could shed a whole new light on the history of the pyramids. It is possible that the pharaoh still rests exactly where the archaeological gold rush in Egypt began about 100 years ago, in the Valley of the Kings. Why was Tutankhamun buried so pompously? In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered an almost intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings. The find soon caused a sensation. The riches seized just beyond the gates of the tomb were immense, but problems also arose. Several workers involved in the opening of the tomb fell ill with a mysterious disorder, and some died. Tutankhamun first became known through the Curse of the Pharaoh. It almost seemed that the former regent of Egypt kept all his riches and did not want to share them even 3,000 years after his death. Today, we know that it was a fungus that had taken root in the burial chambers and poisoned the respiratory system of the workers. What we also know is the fact that Tutankhamun's fame was rather posthumous. Since the 1920s, millions of people around the globe have known the pharaoh's name. When it became known that the young man died at the age of barely 20, romantic stories surrounding a heroic ruler and death were awakened. But over the decades, investigations painted a less glorious picture. As a pharaoh, the son of the great Akhenaten was rather insignificant. Genetic analysis revealed that the boy had very likely been crippled and degenerate since birth. The culprit was the marriage among close relatives, which was not unusual in the Egyptian royal family. Akhenaten had very likely fathered his successor with one of his sisters. Tutankhamun's reign was therefore truly nothing special, but in death he contributed more to the interest in ancient Egypt than any other pharaoh. Millions of people around the world admire the boy's death mask, which is traveling around the globe in a traveling exhibition. In real life, Tutankhamun might have looked much sadder, and why the pharaoh, who ascended the throne at the age of only 9, died so young is still a mystery today. Maybe it was malaria, maybe one of the many diseases, or even murder. Through meticulous detective work, Egyptologists found out thousands of years after the boy's death that the actual regent in the empire was very likely a royal advisor named Ej. Ej caused Tutankhamun to reverse the religious reforms of his father Akhenaten and restore the original deities, along with their temples, to their former glory. Possibly the young king was simply put out of the way afterwards. The only thing that is certain is that the child king was quickly buried with great pomp, as if he was soon to be forgotten. But today, it is this insignificant pharaoh whose tomb reveals so many secrets of Egyptian culture. Among the most exciting finds in the tomb of the ruler are 2 daggers, one of which was made of iron, which does not appear to be royal today. Anyone who knows that iron did not actually exist at the time understands the explosive nature of this find, and can also understand that the dagger was more important than any of the numerous gold artifacts recovered in the burial chambers. The embalmers had probably placed the dagger directly on the dead man's chest, knowing its value. Reconstructions revealed that the iron was made from a very rare raw material that does not actually exist on Earth. Rumors quickly made the rounds that the piece was finally a clue that the Egyptians had contacts with extraterrestrials or were themselves possibly of extraterrestrial origin. But there was another explanation for the dagger. Iron arrived on Earth thousands of years ago with meteorites. By heating, the Egyptians loosened the metal from the rock and then worked the comparatively soft alloy with hammers made of stone or bronze. Sarcophagus of PM. An excavation mission led by archaeologist Ola El Aguizi recently discovered another interesting tomb. About 7 meters deep under the earth, the treasurer of Ramses II had been buried with great honors and rich grave goods. Ptah Mwi was praised in sarcophagus inscriptions as a royal scribe, great overseer of livestock, head of the treasury, and responsible for sacrifices to the gods. Even this official had more wealth in his tomb than was ever found in the Pyramid of Khufu, and a young godlike Tutankhamun was buried without any pyramid cult, but with much wealth. The evidence speaks a clear language against the assumption that the Great Pyramid of Giza served as a burial place.
Mysterious liquid in the sarcophagus. Of all the ancient Egyptian discoveries, burial sites are among the most impressive and important archaeological finds. Thus, many final resting places with their magnificently decorated sarcophagi and precious grave goods already gave us many clues about the distinctive role that the cult of the dead played in everyday life of the ancient Egyptians. However, An ancient coffin, which was dug out of the ground near the city of Alexandria a few years ago, was supposed to make a mockery of the known burial scheme. Before the experts opened the plain black sarcophagus, they already sensed a great archaeological sensation. The experts secretly hoped that the object might contain the remains of Alexander the Great. The final look inside the sarcophagus, however, painted a much different, more disgusting picture. The ancient coffin contained not the bones of a once powerful ruler, but the grotesquely distorted skeletons of 3 people. Even more puzzling than the fact that 3 deceased were placed in one and the same sarcophagus was the fact that the object contained a vile, incomparable foul-smelling broth. The red liquid that covered the mortal remains was soon to fuel the wildest speculations. Thus, not a few superstitious local residents believed that the mummy juice would possess supernatural powers. Some locals even expressed the desire to bottle the liquid and use it for private purposes. In fact, some people were even eager to take a sip of the mummy water in order to imbibe the legendary powers that supposedly lay dormant in the broth. However, a scientific analysis was to prove in the end that the liquid was by no means a legendary elixir, but simply wastewater. Over the years, it had seeped into the soil and penetrated the black granite sarcophagus. The identity of the buried could not be clarified. Due to a skull wound, which presumably originates from an arrowhead, it can be concluded that they were once warriors. Hidden chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Although the world-famous Pyramid of Khufu has towered above the ground for more than 4,500 years, it still holds many unsolved mysteries. After its completion, the monument built in honor of the pharaoh Cheops towered an impressive 146.6 meters. However, due to the gnawing tooth of time and the accompanying material weathering, the imposing structure has now lost about 8 meters of its original height. After the Great Pyramid and its surrounding counterparts had already been thoroughly investigated over the past centuries, an archaeological bang that was no longer thought possible followed in 2017. According to this, the experts succeeded in discovering another, until then completely unknown chamber within the monument, which is composed of around 3 million stone blocks weighing several tons. In detail, it is a 30-meter deep cavity located above the Great Gallery. In the course of their sensational discovery, the experts resorted to the most modern technology of our time. They analyzed the so-called muons, small subatomic particles, which gave them a detailed insight into the interior of the Cheops pyramid. What purpose the mysterious chamber, which is not connected to any known passage system, once had, however, is completely unclear. Heraklion. While the exploration of the imposing pyramids of Giza is relatively easy, the investigation of other ancient Egyptian sites proves to be a much more difficult undertaking due to their natural location. This is also the case with the venerable cities of Heraklion and Canopus. While in ancient times, these towns were still important harbor and coastal cities. Over the millennia, they were completely swallowed up by the arm of the ever-widening sea. All the more astonishing, therefore, are the amazingly well-preserved artifacts that were recovered some time ago from the damp tombs of the once flourishing metropolises. Thus, in the sunken ruins of Heraklion, archaeological divers came across the remains of a mighty temple, some ceramic artifacts, and ancient bronze coins. Even more significant than the artifacts discovered, however, was the realization that the ancient port city was once much larger than experts had previously assumed. The investigation of Canopus was also to significantly expand the hitherto known cityscape. In addition, precious coins and jewelry were brought to the surface, all of which were found to be in astonishingly good condition. Replica of the mythical tomb of Osiris. No less fascinating than the monumental buildings of the venerable pharaonic dynasties is the ancient Egyptian mythology, which significantly shaped the everyday life of the inhabitants of that time. Accordingly, the overriding belief in powerful deities who guided the destinies on Earth played an important role for all inhabitants of ancient Egypt. Thus, the Egyptians were once convinced that every deceased person had to face the god of the dead, Osiris, on his way to the afterlife. As a judge over the dead, the deity subsequently decided on the restless soul's further path. According to ancient Egyptian mythology, Osiris was once killed himself before he was finally raised from the grave by his sister Isis. Since the tomb of the god of the dead was described in detail in the lore of the time, some Egyptians made replicas of the mythical temple of the dead to venerate as sacred sites. And indeed, some researchers recently succeeded in locating one of these fascinating replicas in the necropolis of Sheikh Abd el-Qurna. In detail, it is a massive complex comprising several chambers. Inside the tomb, in turn, there are numerous statues of mysterious demons. The center of the tomb is again a figure depicting Osiris himself. All other structures of the tomb are aligned with this statue. Bulbs of Dendera. In order to perpetuate the reality of their lives as well as their deeply held beliefs in a pictorial way, the ancient Egyptians created numerous reliefs, artistic representations carved in stone. Among the strangest of these images has always been a representation that went down in history as the light bulbs of Dendera. According to it, the corresponding relief is adorned by enigmatic, indefinable objects that strongly resemble modern light bulbs. Representations of this kind fuel the thesis of people who are native to the world of pre-astronautics. Thus, the followers of this parascience are convinced that the extraterrestrial life forms once roamed our globe, worshipped as deities by ancient people. Consequently, these extraterrestrial visitors also brought advanced technologies to our globe, which far exceeded the technical knowledge of the population at that time. So, is it possible that the ancient Egyptians were familiar with the use of electrical objects? Proponents of this theory argue that the temple where the mural was placed did not show any traces of soot. However, this would necessarily have been the case if the Egyptians had used conventional torches as illuminants. Egyptologists, in turn, counter this argument with the fact that in other ancient Egyptian sites, layers of soot were found, some of which were centimeters thick. The lost city of Aten. If we're to travel some 3,400 years into the past, we would find the ancient Egyptian city of Aten, about 5 kilometers from Luxor. For many decades, archaeologists drew their information about the city named after the sun god of the same name exclusively from historical lore. The city itself was once considered irretrievably lost. It was to take until the end of 2020 before the archaeologists succeeded in freeing the ruins of the once vibrant town from the earth. In all probability, Aten was once the largest metropolis in all of ancient Egypt. Accordingly, the city was once a thriving economic and administrative center many millennia ago. The discovery of the ruins of Aten has a similar significance among experts as the discovery of the legendary tomb of Tutankhamun. At the time of the city's construction, ancient Egypt was practically in its prime. Thus, future investigation of the archaeological site may provide important clues about everyday life in a thriving metropolis at that time. But another great historical mystery could also be solved by the finds that may be recorded there in the future. What motivated Akhenaten and Nefertiti, one of the most controversial Egyptian pharaohs, and his wife, to move to Tel el-Amarna? Since the construction of Aten fell during Akhenaten's reign, this mystery could be deciphered with the help of artifacts found there. Electromagnetic energies under the Cheops pyramid. Meanwhile, the mysterious chamber inside the Pyramid of Khufu, which we already introduced to you, is not the only mystery that surrounds the time-honored monument. The Egyptian pyramids have long been suspected in some circles of not merely functioning as mere burial sites, but in truth being in harmony with the unseen forces of nature. A 2018 investigation found that the structure may surprisingly be capable of concentrating electromagnetic energies in its chambers, as well as beneath its foundation. This was the result of a theoretical modeling study commissioned by Russia's ITMO University. A closer look at the research results again leaves us in deep amazement. According to the results, pyramid-shaped structures are capable of significantly suppressing the reflections of incident electromagnetic waves. Theoretically, even radio waves could be controlled in this way. What discovery from ancient Egypt intrigued you the most? We look forward to your comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Worlds to never miss another one of our videos in the future. If you enjoyed our incursion into the legendary world of the ancient Egyptians, please give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time.